Okay, so now I'm going to show you a draft report that I have written. I am calling it Comparison of the Nephrology Physician Service Department between Super Duper and Fantasy Hospitals. I should likely also insert a date in here. And it is for the Quality Assurance Committee. This is my table of contents. You can see I have an abstract, an introduction, description of the patient's or the physician's service, my methodology, results and summary of findings, conclusion, reference, and I'm choosing in this particular scenario to put my tables and graphs as an appendix. So that's how I'm going to show you this particular report. What I'm showing you next is my outline. This is not the formal report. You do not use bullets in most formal writings. You will not have bullets when you actually write your paper. So the first part of my paper is going to be my abstract. This is basically a brief 1 to 2 paragraph. If you would have a longer paragraph, it might be up to 4 paragraphs. Or a longer paper, it might be up to 4 paragraphs. But because this is somewhat brief, 1 to 2 paragraphs would suffice. But it's a summary of your entire report. And you're going to include brief statements from each of the sections below. After I write my abstract, I'm going to write an introduction. This is where I'm going to introduce my topic as well as the purpose of the report. So it's for the Quality Assurance Committee. I may explain a little bit about what they're looking for. You want to look at what was studied, how, so it was a timeline, or how was the timeline, why it's being asked for, when, and what was learned. So there's a lot of basic information that goes into your introduction. It's basically also where you may find your thesis statement if you were to write one. Up next, I'm choosing to describe, which is basically a little bit of background information. In this case, I'm going to describe my physician's service. So this is nephrology, which is the study of kidneys. So likely I would have a citation here where I would have to cite and reference it using the APA format. I would explain how many beds are in this department, number of staff, etc. So for you, you're going to make this up. This is going to be fictitious information. And again, you need to keep in mind who your audience is. So if it was all doctors, you probably wouldn't explain what nephrology is. If you had some people from senior management, you would likely have to explain who that is. So you really need to keep in mind who your audience is. That's very, very, very important when you're writing reports. Up next, we have your methodology. So this is how you explain how your statistics were calculated. So what's the formula for weighted cases? How is the estimated length of stay calculated? What is ELOS? How is your ALOS explained? You should define your acronyms if you haven't already done so. And again, keep in mind who your audience is. In your summary and reports, you may talk about why, in this particular case, my super duper hospital has a longer ALOS than the fantasy hospital. Both of these hospitals exceed the ELOS. Now the caveat, so caveat is kind of like an issue or a disclaimer, that type of thing. What's kind of gone wrong? So the caveat in this particular case is that Super Duper Hospital only had 7 cases, while Fantasy Hospital had 301 typical cases. Therefore, and this isn't necessarily a great comparison. So that would be my caveat in this particular case. My conclusion, this is where I would focus on any questions that may have arisen, and I would answer them in this section. I would summarize my results, and I would also include some interesting statistics in this section. Up next, I would have my reference page. Obviously, I would have my APA format references listed on this page, but I would fill that out typically as I write it. I would also ensure that I have my page number in the top right-hand corner. And this is what my appendix is going to look like. So I'm going to have my tables and graphs in the same section. My table 1 will be a comparison of the 2 hospitals, and I'll insert a table there. And then I will also create one graph that compares the ALOS and the ELOS. And then I would create a second graph that compares my cases to weighted cases for the hospitals. And then I would create my graphs below. I would add more detail into my titles, including, of course, you always need to have dates. I would make sure my footer information is there. So I would insert my tables and graphs into my appendix. One last thing that I want to mention, I'm just going to go back here. So what was studied? So the types of patients that were involved. Why? So what does the Quality Assurance Committee do? How is regarding to, is looking at where did I get my data from? How did I come up with the information that I found below? When, of course, is the timeline, and what was learned. In your methodology section, again, make sure you have citations and references for these types of calculations.